Have you ever stopped to think about the invisible system that shapes, well, pretty much everything you do? And no, I'm not talking about the internet or social media. I'm talking about the law. In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on this incredibly powerful force and really try to get our heads around what it actually is. So, let's just think about your morning. Before you even took that first sip of coffee, how many laws do you think had already played a part in your day? Seriously, the answer is probably way more than you'd guess, mainly because they're just hiding in plain sight. For instance, that simple act of buying a coffee, believe it or not, that's a legally binding contract. Yep, you agree to pay, and the coffee shop agrees to give you something that's safe to drink. That whole little exchange is governed by contract law and consumer protection law. Or what about hopping in your car? The second you turn that key, you're operating inside a whole web of traffic regulations, vehicle safety standards, and insurance laws. It's this complex legal framework just to get you from point A to point B. And hey, even paying your electricity bill online, that involves legal agreements with the utility company, regulations about energy prices, and even laws that govern digital payments. All these examples are pointing to one crucial idea.
And that crucial idea is this: law is everywhere. It's embedded in every single minute of our lives. It really is like an invisible operating system for society, just running in the background, shaping almost every interaction we have.
But here's the paradox, right? Even though law is all around us all the time, coming up with one single, simple definition for what is law, well, it's incredibly difficult. In fact, it's one of the most challenging questions in all of legal studies. This is where the legal scholar Glanville Williams really hit the nail on the head. He basically argued that the word law doesn't have one universal meaning. Nope, it all depends on the context. And this slide illustrates his point perfectly. Look, on one hand, we can use the word law to talk about the unwritten rules and customs in a small ancient tribe. But on the other hand, we use that exact same word to describe the super formal written regulations of a modern government. Same word, two completely different systems. So if one single definition isn't going to work, how do we get a handle on what law really is? A much better way is to look at it through a few different lenses. Each lens gives us a unique angle on what it does and why it's there. All right, first up is the governance lens. This is the most basic view. It just says that law is the set of essential, enforceable rules that allows any society to function. It's the stable framework that lets us all live together without chaos. Next up, we've got the authority lens. Now, this one's interesting because it focuses on where the law comes from. From this angle, a law isn't just any old rule. It has to be created by a specific body, like a government or a monarch, that has the recognized authority to make it. You can see how this view is at the center of debates about who gets to be in charge. Another way to see it is through the lens of social order. This perspective sees law as an active tool, usually one used by a government, to quite literally order the way society behaves. So it's not just about keeping the peace, it's about actively shaping and guiding how we all act. Okay, now this next perspective is a whole lot more critical. It views law not as some neutral tool for keeping order, but as a mechanism of power, a way for the ruling class to stay in control and push its own agenda. This is the lens people often use when they question whether laws are truly fair for everybody. And finally, we have the lens of law as a command. This one really highlights its binding force. A law isn't a suggestion, right? It's a direct command from a controlling authority that you must obey. And if you don't, well, there are real legal consequences. So we've got these different ways of looking at formal law. But what about all the other unwritten rules we follow every single day? You know, the social stuff. This brings up a really important distinction. What's the difference between a formal law and an informal social rule? This table breaks it down so well. On one side, you've got social norms. They're usually unwritten and they're enforced by community pressure. You know, things like basic table manners. But on the other side, formal law is codified, it's written down, and it's enforced by state institutions like the police and the courts. You can actually see the evolution here. An early tribal punishment like banishment has been formalized over centuries into our modern system of penal sanctions. Okay, so we've seen that law is everywhere and that it's surprisingly tricky to define. But that brings us to the final and most important question. Why does this invisible system matter so much? What's its ultimate purpose? At its very core, the law really serves a dual function. It's a two-sided coin.
On one side, it's there to formally regulate and limit our behavior, to keep society in order. But on the other side, it also exists to empower us, giving us fundamental rights and protections against others, and even against the government itself. It's this constant balancing act between freedom and restriction.
And that brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. When you really think about your own life and all the different ways the law intersects with it every single day, do you feel it more as a force that empowers you or one that limits you? The answer, I bet, might just change depending on the day you ask.